The night was thick with snow. Wind cut like knives. A helicopter made an emergency landing at the forest edge. The pilot stumbled out and collapsed into the snow. Radio static. No signal. No help. Emergency vehicles couldn't reach through the storm. A single dad shoveling snow heard a cry. He grabbed his coat. Ran against the wind. He found her shivering. Hypothermia setting in. He covered her with his jacket. Pulled her to his cabin. Hot water. Blankets. Wood stove. When the storm passed, he quietly returned to his night shift. Days later, a decision changed his daughter's life forever. Caleb Ward was 40 years old, a single father living in a small mountain town with his 9-year-old daughter, Ivy. He worked as a road maintenance technician on the mountain pass. Night shifts during winter. The pay was enough to cover rent, food, and basics. Nothing more. Ivy had been born with progressive hearing loss. Not completely deaf, but enough that she struggled in school. She missed instructions, fell behind in reading, had trouble making friends because she couldn't always follow conversations. The school suggested hearing aids and speech therapy. The cost was beyond what Caleb could afford. Insurance covered some, but not enough. He'd been on a waiting list for state assistance for 2 years. So Ivy made do. She learned to read lips, sat in the front row, worked twice as hard as other kids to keep up. Caleb did everything he could. He learned sign language from library books. He practiced with her every night. He never missed a parent-teacher conference, never missed picking her up from school. His schedule was built around her. Morning shift ended at 2 p.m. Just enough time to pick up Ivy at 3:15. Evenings were hers, homework, dinner, reading together before bed. Then he'd go back out for night patrol, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., checking roads, clearing ice, making sure the pass was safe for morning traffic. It was exhausting, lonely, but it was stable, and stability was what Ivy needed. Caleb's wife had died 3 years ago. Car accident on an icy road during a winter storm. She'd skidded off the highway. The car went down an embankment. By the time someone found her, it was too late. The worst part was that people had driven past, seen the accident, but didn't stop because of the storm, because it was too dangerous, too inconvenient. Caleb understood fear. He understood self-preservation, but he'd never forgiven the drivers who kept going, who left his wife alone in the cold. Since then, he'd made a promise. If he ever saw someone in trouble, he would stop, no matter what, no matter the weather, no matter the risk. That promise was why he was outside at 11 p.m. that night, shoveling the walkway in a blizzard that had come out of nowhere. The weather report had said light snow. Instead, it was a whiteout. Visibility was almost zero. The wind howled through the trees like something alive. Caleb was about to go inside when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not the wind, not an animal. An engine. Struggling. Then silence. Then a voice. Faint. Calling for help. Caleb grabbed his heavy coat and a flashlight. He pushed through the snow toward the tree line behind his property. That's where he found the helicopter. Small. Civilian. Emergency markings barely visible through the snow. And next to it, a woman in a flight suit, trying to stand but collapsing back into the snow. Caleb ran to her. "Are you hurt? Can you move?" The woman looked up at him. Her face was pale. Her lips were turning blue. "Radio's dead. Can't call for help." "How long have you been out here?" 10 minutes, maybe 15. That was too long. Hypothermia could set in fast in these conditions. Caleb didn't ask questions, didn't ask who she was or why she'd crashed. That could wait. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her. "Can you walk?" "I think so. My cabin's close. Come on." He supported her weight as they moved through the snow. She was shivering violently now. A bad sign. Inside the cabin, Caleb sat her by the wood stove. He piled blankets on her, made hot tea, checked for injuries. "Anything broken?" "No, just cold." "Stay here, I'm calling for help." His phone had weak signal, but enough. He called emergency services, gave them his location. They said rescue couldn't get through for at least 2 hours. Roads were impassable. "I can wait," the woman said. Her teeth were chattering. "You've done enough. Caleb shook his head. You're staying until they get here. He kept the stove going, made her drink more tea, watched to make sure she stayed conscious. After an hour, her color started returning. The shivering eased. Thank you, she said. I'm Mara, by the way. Mara Collins. Caleb Ward. You saved my life, Caleb. He shrugged. You would have done the same. I don't know if I would have. Coming out in this storm, most people would have stayed inside. Most people aren't me. Mara studied him. Why did you come? Caleb was quiet for a moment. Because someone needed help. That's enough. When the rescue team finally arrived, Caleb helped them get Mara to the vehicle. She tried to thank him again, but he waved it off. Just glad you're okay. Get somewhere warm. As the emergency vehicle drove away, Caleb checked his watch. 2 a.m. He needed to get to his shift. Ivy was at his mother's house for the night. Safe, warm. That's what mattered. He didn't think about Mara Collins again. Didn't expect to see her. He'd done what needed doing. That was the end of it. But 3 days later, there was a knock on his door, and everything changed. Mara Collins woke up in a field medical station 30 miles from the crash site. The doctors told her she'd been lucky. Another 20 minutes and she would have suffered severe hypothermia. Possibly death. She asked about the man who saved her. The paramedics didn't know much. Someone named Caleb lives in a cabin near the crash site. 2 days later, after medical clearance, Mara drove back to the mountain town. She found Caleb's cabin. Caleb opened the door, surprised. Mara, you're okay. Thanks to you. She held up a gift basket. I wanted to say thank you. Caleb looked uncomfortable. You didn't need to do that. Yes, I did. You saved my life. You would have been fine. Rescue was coming. Not in time, Mara said. The doctors told me. If I'd been out there longer, I wouldn't have made it. Well, I'm glad you're all right. Can I come in for a minute? Caleb hesitated, then stepped aside. The cabin was neat but sparse, and on the refrigerator, a child's drawing and a school calendar. You have a daughter? Ivy, she's 9, at school right now. As they talked, a school bus arrived. A little girl came running up. She stopped when she saw Mara, suddenly shy. Ivy, this is Mara. Mara, my daughter. Mara knelt down. Hi, Ivy. Your dad told me you like to draw. Ivy nodded but didn't speak. Mara noticed something. The way Ivy watched her lips. The way her eyes focused on Mara's face. Can you show me your drawings? Ivy's face lit up. She ran inside and returned with a sketchbook. As Ivy showed the drawings, Mara paid attention. The girl was bright, creative, but she spoke slowly, carefully, and she watched mouths when people talked. Mara knew these signs. After a few minutes, Ivy went to do homework. Caleb walked Mara to her car. She's wonderful, Mara said. She is. Does she have hearing problems? Caleb stiffened. How did you know? My younger brother had progressive hearing loss. I recognize the signs. Caleb nodded slowly. She was born with it. It's gotten worse. Is she getting treatment? Hearing aids? We're on a waiting list. Insurance doesn't cover enough. I'm saving up, but... He trailed off, embarrassed. I understand. We're doing fine. Ivy's strong. We manage. I'm sure you do. What do you do for work? Road maintenance. Night shift on the mountain pass. That's why you were up late. Why you heard the crash. Yeah. Mara nodded. Thank you again. She drove away, mind racing. Mara wasn't just a pilot. She was head of an educational outreach program for a major aerospace company. She ran a foundation providing STEM education for underprivileged children. She'd taken the position because of her brother. She knew what it was like to watch someone struggle with a manageable disability. Ivy reminded her of him, bright, capable, but held back by circumstances. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Caleb running into a blizzard to save a stranger, working night shifts to support his daughter, doing everything right, and it still wasn't enough. She had resources, connections, the ability to help. But Caleb had pride. He'd barely accepted the gift basket. She needed to be careful. The next morning, Mara made calls. First to an audiologist. I need a favor. A 9-year-old with progressive hearing loss. Family can't afford treatment. Full evaluation. Pro bono? The audiologist agreed. Next, the foundation director. I want to start a pilot program. Hearing assistance for rural mountain children. I have a test case. The director was enthusiastic. 3 days later, Mara returned to the cabin. Caleb answered, surprised. Mara, is everything okay? Can we talk? It's important. He let her in. Ivy was at school. Caleb, I want to help Ivy. His expression closed off. We're fine. Please hear me out. I run an educational foundation. We provide resources for kids, medical equipment, therapy. It's what we do. I'm not a charity case. I'm not saying you are, but Ivy deserves every opportunity, and you saved my life. Let me do something meaningful with that life. Caleb was quiet. What would this involve? A full hearing evaluation. If she needs hearing aids, we provide them. Therapy, we cover it. No cost. Why would you do this? Mara met his eyes. Because you ran into a blizzard to save someone you didn't know. You didn't ask who I was or what I could offer. You just helped. That's rare, and I want to honor it. This isn't about paying me back. No, it's about making sure your daughter has the future she deserves. Caleb looked at his daughter's drawings on the refrigerator. If we do this, it has to be quiet. No publicity, no press. I don't want Ivy feeling like a charity story. Completely private, Mara promised. Caleb took a breath. Okay, let's do it. Mara smiled. Thank you for trusting me. You ran toward a crash in a blizzard. I think I can trust you. In that moment, two strangers became something more. Two people who understood what it meant to help without asking for anything in return. The hearing evaluation happened 2 weeks later. Mara arranged everything. She drove Caleb and Ivy to the city, to one of the best audiology centers in the state. Ivy was nervous. She held her father's hand tightly. It's okay, sweetheart, Caleb said. They're just going to check your hearing. It won't hurt. The evaluation took 3 hours. When it was over, the audiologist called Caleb and Mara into her office. Mr. Ward, your daughter has moderate to severe progressive hearing loss in both ears. Without intervention, she'll likely lose most functional hearing by her teenage years. Caleb's face went pale. What can we do? Hearing aids will help significantly. Combined with therapy, she can develop normally. But the sooner we start, the better. How much will it cost? The audiologist glanced at Mara. Ms. Collins's foundation is covering everything. Caleb turned to Mara. That's too much. It's what the foundation does. I can't accept this. Yes, you can. For Ivy. Caleb walked to the window, silent for a long time. Why? He finally asked. Why are you really doing this? Can we talk privately? They left the office and found a quiet corner. You want to know why I'm helping? Mara asked. Yes. Then I need to know something first. Why did you help me that night? There's more to it, isn't there? Caleb was quiet. Then he spoke, barely above a whisper. My wife died 3 years ago. Car accident in a winter storm. She went off the road. He paused. People drove past. They saw the accident, but they didn't stop. The storm was too bad. Mara felt her chest tighten. By the time someone called it in, she'd been there over an hour. In the cold. Alone. She might have survived if someone had stopped sooner. His voice cracked. But no one did, because it was inconvenient, risky, easier to keep driving. Caleb. So I made a promise. If I ever saw someone in trouble, I would stop. No matter what. He turned to face her. That's why I ran into the storm. Not because I'm a hero, because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. Mara's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. Just tell me why you're doing this. The real reason. Mara nodded. My younger brother, David. He had progressive hearing loss just like Ivy. We didn't catch it early enough. By the time we realized how severe it was, he'd already fallen behind. She wiped her eyes. He struggled for years, bullied, isolated. He gave up on dreams because he didn't think he could do them. I watched him lose confidence, lose hope. What happened to him? He's okay now. He's an accountant, has hearing aids, a good life. But it took so long, so many years of unnecessary struggle. If we'd intervened earlier, she trailed off. That's why you do this work. Yes, I can't change what happened to David, but I can make sure other kids don't go through the same thing. Kids like Ivy. Caleb studied her face. So this is personal for you too. Funny, very personal. I'm not just doing this because you saved me. I'm doing this because Ivy deserves it, because I have the ability to help, and I'd never forgive myself if I didn't use it. I'm scared, Caleb admitted. Scared of accepting help. What if the foundation changes its mind? It won't. I'll make sure of it personally. I run an organization with a $15 million annual budget. I have lawyers, contracts. This isn't charity that can disappear. This is structured support. Ivy will be taken care of. Why are you so invested? Because you ran into a blizzard for me, asked for nothing. That kind of selflessness is rare. When I see it, I want to honor it. She paused. But more than that, I see my family in this. I have the power to make it different for Ivy. How can I not use it? Caleb's eyes were red. I don't know how to thank you. You already did. You saved my life. Let me do something meaningful with that life. Caleb took a breath. Okay, yes. Hey. Trust they made the arrangements. Scheduled everything. When they got Ivy, she was drawing. Daddy, are we done? Caleb knelt down. Almost, sweetheart. You're going to get special helpers for your ears. They'll help you hear better. Will I be able to hear like the other kids? Yes. Ivy's face lit up. Really? Really? She threw her arms around his neck. Mara watched from the doorway. She thought about her brother, about the years of struggle, and she thought about the night of the crash, about Caleb appearing like an angel in the storm. Sometimes salvation was a circle. 3 weeks later, Ivy got her hearing aids. The moment they turned them on, she gasped. I can hear the birds, she whispered, tears streaming. I can hear them singing. Caleb was crying too. Thank you, Ivy said to Mara. And for the first time, she didn't need to watch lips. She could hear clearly. You're welcome, sweetheart. That night, Mara called her brother. David, it's me. Hey, Mara, what's up? I just wanted to tell you I love you. All the hard stuff we went through, it meant something. It led to helping someone else. That's good, Mara. I'm proud of you. After they hung up, Mara sat in her car, watching snowfall. Full circle, she thought. And she was right. Over the next 6 months, Ivy's transformation was remarkable. The hearing aids made an immediate difference, but it was the therapy that changed everything. Twice a week, Mara drove them to speech therapy sessions. She never made it feel like charity. She just showed up, offered a ride, stayed in the waiting room with a book. Caleb tried to refuse at first. You don't need to do this. We can take the bus. The bus takes 2 hours each way. This takes 40 minutes. Let me help. So he let her. Ivy's speech became clearer. Her confidence grew. She started raising her hand in class, made friends, brought home perfect spelling tests. One day her teacher called Caleb. I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. Ivy's like a different child, Caleb told Mara that night. They were sitting in her car outside the therapy center, waiting for Ivy to finish. Her teacher says she's thriving. Mara smiled. She's a smart kid. She just needed the tools. It's more than that. She's happy. For the first time since her mother died, she's really happy. They sat in comfortable silence. Can I ask you something? Caleb said. Of course. Why don't you do press about this? Most foundations would make a big deal. Photo ops, news stories, tax write-offs. Mara shrugged. Because that would make it about me. This is about Ivy and about every other kid who needs help but doesn't want to be a poster child for someone else's generosity. Most people with your resources don't think that way. Most people with my resources didn't grow up watching their brother struggle, didn't see how charity can feel like pity if it's not done right. Caleb studied her. You really get it. I try to. Inside, Ivy was finishing her session. Through the window, they could see her laughing with her therapist. She's going to be okay, Mara said softly. Yeah, she is. Caleb's voice was thick with emotion. Thank you. I know I keep saying it, But I don't know how else to. You don't have to keep thanking me. Just let her be great. That's all the thanks I need. But Mara was doing more than just helping Ivy. Quietly, without fanfare, she expanded the Foundation's Mountain Region program. 3 more audiologists, 5 more therapy centers, funding for 20 kids in rural areas who needed hearing assistance. She used Ivy as the pilot case, proved the model worked, then scaled it. None of the press releases mentioned Caleb or Ivy by name. None of the promotional materials showed their faces. It was just listed as Mountain Region Hearing Initiative. Caleb only found out about it when another parent at Ivy's school mentioned it. Did you hear about that new program? They're providing free hearing aids to kids in the county. My neighbor's son just qualified. Caleb called Mara that night. You expanded the program? Yes. Because of Ivy. Because of what I learned helping Ivy. That the need is bigger than one child. That there are systems we can change. You didn't tell me. Because it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about the kids who need help. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You know what the crazy thing is? What? I ran into a storm to save you because I didn't want someone to die alone like my wife did. But you ended up saving something bigger. You saved my daughter's future. And now you're saving other kids too. We saved each other, Caleb. That's how it works. That winter, exactly 1 year after the crash, Mara invited Caleb and Ivy to a foundation event. It's just a small gathering. Board members, donors, nothing fancy, but I'd like you both to be there. Why? Because I'm giving a speech, and I want you to hear it. Caleb agreed, though he was uncomfortable with the attention. The event was elegant but understated. About 50 people in a hotel conference room. When Mara took the stage, she spoke about the Foundation's mission, about the Mountain Region program, about the impact they'd made. Then she said something that made Caleb's breath catch. A year ago, I crashed in a snowstorm. A stranger saved my life. He didn't know who I was, didn't care what I could offer. He just helped because it was the right thing to do. She looked at Caleb. That man taught me something important. That real kindness doesn't ask for recognition. It doesn't demand gratitude. It just acts. And I've tried to honor that lesson in everything we do here. She paused. We don't help kids to get credit. We help them because they deserve it. Because we can. Because that's what humans should do for each other. The room applauded. After the speech, a board member approached Caleb. You're the man she was talking about? I guess so. You saved her life. She saved my daughter's. I'd say we're even. The board member smiled. I don't think that's how she sees it. How does she see it? Like she finally found a way to pay forward what her family went through. Like she's been waiting for this her whole life. Caleb watched Mara across the room, talking with donors, passionate about her work. She caught his eye and smiled, and he understood. This wasn't about debt. It wasn't about owing. It was about recognizing kindness when you saw it and choosing to extend it further. That was how change happened. Not through grand gestures, but through small acts that rippled outward. He'd saved one life in a storm. She was using that saved life to change hundreds more. And maybe somewhere down the line, one of those kids would grow up and help someone else. The circle would keep growing. That's what mattered. Another year passed. Winter returned to the mountain town. Snow fell gently outside Caleb's cabin. Inside, Ivy sat at the kitchen table doing homework. Her hearing aids were barely visible. She hummed while she worked. Dad, can you help me with this math problem? Caleb looked at the textbook. Advanced for a 5th grader. You're doing pre-algebra now? Yeah, Mrs. Peterson says I'm ready for the accelerated class. Pride swelled in Caleb's chest. Let's figure it out together. Later that evening, there was a knock at the door. Mara stood on the porch, holding a thermos. Brought hot chocolate. Thought you might want company. Always. Come in. They sat by the wood stove. Ivy showed Mara her latest drawings, a series of birds in flight. These are beautiful, Ivy. I'm drawing things I can hear now. The birds sing different songs. I'm trying to show that. You're an artist. Ivy beamed. Then she looked at Mara seriously. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you help us? Mara glanced at Caleb, then back at Ivy. Because your dad helped me when I needed it most. and because I know what it's like to need help and not have it. My dad says you're the reason I can hear the birds. Your dad's the reason for a lot of things. I just helped open a door. Ivy hugged her. Thank you for opening my door. After Ivy went to bed, Caleb and Mara sat outside on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the snow. She wants to be a pilot when she grows up, Caleb said. Mara laughed. Of course she does. Is that crazy? No, it's perfect. She can do anything she wants now. They were quiet for a while. I got a letter last week, Mara said, from a mother in the next county. Her son got hearing aids through the program. She wrote to say thank you. That must feel good. It does, but you know what feels better? What? Knowing that somewhere a kid is hearing music for the first time, or birds singing, or their parents' voice clearly. That's what matters. Caleb nodded. You changed a lot of lives. We changed them. You started this. That night in the storm. I just did what anyone should do. That's my point. You did what anyone should do, but most people don't. And because you did, everything else became possible. Snow continued to fall, silent, peaceful. Do you ever think about that night? Caleb asked. The crash? Every day, but not in a bad way. I think about how lucky I was that you heard me, that you came, that you didn't leave me there. I couldn't have lived with myself if I had. I know. That's why you're extraordinary. I'm just a guy. No, Caleb, you're the guy who ran into a blizzard. There's a difference. Inside, they could hear Ivy talking in her sleep, mumbling about birds and flying in dreams. She's going to do great things, Mara said. Yeah, she is. You should be proud. I am every single day. Mara stood to leave. Caleb walked her to her car. Same time next week? She asked. Same time. She drove away, taillights disappearing into the snow. Caleb stood outside for a moment, breathing in the cold air. A year and a half ago, he'd heard a cry for help in a storm. He'd run toward it without thinking. That one decision had changed everything. Not just for him, not just for Ivy, but for dozens of families across the mountain region. All because he'd chosen to stop, to help, to care. He thought about his wife, about the drivers who'd passed her by. Maybe he couldn't change what happened to her, but he could make sure it didn't happen to others. And in doing that, he'd found something unexpected. Not just help for his daughter, but proof that goodness multiplied. That one act of kindness could ripple outward in ways you'd never imagine. He went inside, checked on Ivy. She was sleeping peacefully, her hearing aids on the nightstand. Tomorrow she'd wake up and hear the world clearly, and that was everything. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in the power of showing up when it matters, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Daddy Healing Stories. We share real stories about fathers who choose kindness, who sacrifice quietly, who change lives without asking for recognition. These are the stories that remind us what true strength looks like. Hit subscribe and join us, because our children are watching, and what we do in the hard moments shapes who they become. See you in the next one.